Welcome to another edition of Captains of Industry. I am Godfrey Mutizwa. Now, Stephen Saad is co-founder and CEO of Aspen Group, Africa's largest pharmaceutical manufacturer. It's been a long journey, and 26 years if I have to be exact. A time during which he has helped build a company with a presence in more than 50 countries, in 6 continents, employing over 9,000 people who turn over more than 38 billion rand in sales every single year. He is here today to talk about the challenges and opportunities, and let me add, and I'm sure you'll agree, the fun that he has been through in the past few years. Stephen, welcome to the program. Great to host you and talk about the important work that you have been doing over the decades, but I think more specifically also the challenges that you have faced. I wanted to begin by asking you, first of all, when you look at the continent from a business perspective as Aspen, what do you see, more opportunities or more challenges than opportunities?
I think that there's a mixture there. As you've seen, some of the South African companies have really been struggling with taxation, also being able to extract your money out of the continent. And I think South Africans sometimes think they are more well accepted in Africa than we really are. That said, if I just speak from a very narrow Aspen perspective, it's been an incredible journey because particularly we started with ARVs, as you know, and brought them into Africa first. But very recently, you know, the COVID vaccine, which was not available to Africa, was delivered into Africa by Aspen. And Aspen became a rallying call for all of Africa of, you know, this is what we can do. Please don't tell us we don't have skills. We just need people to have confidence in us, invest in us. And so from a very narrow Aspen perspective, we see so many more opportunities in the continent. You know, there was a big push after COVID that even routine vaccines must be made in Africa, and Gavi, who are the global procurer of vaccines, are trying to buy 40% of their vaccines now from Africa. Of course, Aspen's in a good position in Africa. We demonstrated that with COVID and manufacture. So, yeah, I think the continent has tremendous opportunities. But I think you need to manage them well. I think you've got to manage them with some humility, and I don't think you can just charge in and manage everything. It's a cooperation, and it's something you've got to do in partnership and not in isolation.
Yeah, I wanted to dig a little deeper into some of those challenges that you speak about. So you raised the issue of taxation, and as you note, we've certainly seen challenges of South African companies in parts of the continent. But when you look at it from an Aspen perspective, especially given the political will that we saw coming through in the fight against COVID, would you say that it's become easier now to do business across the continent? And are you able to be in all the countries that you want to be without having to think about whether you'll be able to get your money out?
You know, what we've done long before COVID is to not just, we try and invest, and I know people think it's crazy and pioneering, but we try and invest. It's fine to extract value out of countries, but you also need to put something back in. To that end, we've got facilities in Dar es Salaam, in Nairobi, in Accra. So it takes a bit of time and effort because, you know, there's often you've got challenges, whether, you know, it's electricity, water, and not challenges that are now not dissimilar in our own country, but there are challenges across those countries as well. But we've hung in, we've built facilities, we try and localize manufacture just to try and increase the overall skill base. In fact, what we're trying to set up now is in our facilities in Port Elizabeth is a pilot plant so that we can actually train all of Africa to be able to make steriles, vaccines, and create a talent pool. It's all very well say, I want to do this and I want to do that, and we can all build fancy facilities. But at the end of the day, no matter what business you're in, human capital is the most critical element involved. But yes, we haven't had as many challenges as others. We do have challenges. We also battle to get our money out every now and again, and tax people come knocking on the door, but certainly not to the extent I've seen of others. And we've been really well treated across Africa.
Let me ask you a trick question. Are there countries, Stephen, that you want to be in, that you are not in at the moment because of perhaps risk perceptions or perhaps other challenges?
we in almost every country in the world, either directly, as you mentioned up front, maybe we South Africa's most global company. I think we are in terms of. But that said, there are countries where we will have distribution or distribution agents in a market which is the largest single market is the US. We're completely underrepresented in America, for example. But maybe we want to be there, maybe we don't. We've had a good feel around where we do and don't want to be. Some markets we thought just didn't work out for us, like Japan. We didn't do badly, but we felt like we were on a treadmill. We were going to stand still. So are there markets? What we have done is we've built this base. We've got the sort of 50 units down, and we'd like to get more critical mass, because the cost actually, Godfrey, is in setup. It's expensive to set up. But once you've set up and you start putting just products or turnover on top, you start seeing increasing profitability. And that's what we'd like to do, is really build on the strengths and the footprint we've created.
Yeah. So recently you announced you are getting into the Middle East, to Dubai, to be specific. Before we talk about that expansion, I wanted you to help me have a vision of what an Aspen of the future will be looking like. I know you have got those strategic plans 3 years, 5 years down the line.
So we've really, and it's been very public, we have said we wanted to shift our business into sterols. Sterols are products that go into your eyes, injectables, that go into your arms. And we felt that a lot of our multinational partners in the pharmaceutical industry would go that way. For example, vaccines is a very good example of sterile manufacturing. So if you say where we are in 3 to 5 years' time, we've built factories, massive factories, can make billions of doses of product. And we are, if I may say with all humility, a very competent, maybe amongst the very best manufacturers in the world. That's something we've always prided ourselves on. So here's an opportunity in a very difficult area. And I would think if you look 3 to 5 years, Aspen is a much bigger player in sterols, in vaccines, and in manufacturing sterols globally, even for third parties. And I think it's a very exciting opportunity, and it's something that certainly is right at the top of the radar for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about the philosophy behind the growth of the company, and I was attracted here by a philosophy that's been described in your brochure as speaking to, quote, to rest is to rust. What does that mean?
Yeah, we've lived by that, and so much in life is. You want to have a purposeful life, Godfrey. You want to have a life where you add value, and very soon you realize in life that material items are not going to make you happy. And so to have an opportunity to add value to people's lives is something that should keep you busy. And we've got a very simple philosophy within the business that to be happy in life, to have that balance in life, you should be a busy person. Whatever it is, you get your balance right in your life. But I haven't seen people that are busy that are unhappy. And so that is why we just keep moving. Rest is rust. And people say, oh, look at your journey. Take us from your little house in Greyville to this most globalized company. Yeah. And we just don't think back. We keep moving forward. We haven't got a lot of time to celebrate success. Lots of responsibility, responsibility for the people in the organization and responsibility for patients going forward. And we've only just started, and that is why rest is rust is for us. There is no place for the rust to settle. And it might be ironic, Godfrey, coming from me sitting in Durban. So maybe I know rust better than most.
You certainly do. You certainly do. So 26 years on, as you say, you are beginning. But back to the picture that you painted about an Aspen of the future. I wanted to know Africa's place in it.
Yeah, when you start a business in Africa, your roots are in Africa and in African soil. Africa will always have a massive part to play, even if it is a small part of the overall turnover. What we've tried to do in our business is to bring manufacturing and expertise back to Africa to be able to manufacture for the globe. And that was something which I think 26 years ago, no one would ever have believed possible. And we've sat here and we've built, and we continue to build a massive sterile and solid capability, solids of tablets, etc., that we hope to make for the globe, and we are making for the globe. So Africa will be a massive part of our business from a manufacturing point of view, and also we are hopeful that if we are as successful as we hope to be in vaccines, we're a big player in getting a good share of 40% that Gavi want to buy from Africa. And our footprint and the factories that we built across East and West Africa in time are recognized for the value they bring and bring the growth as well. At the moment, Africa don't always talk with one voice and can easily be fragmented. It's not like the United States of America, which are incredibly united. The EU is united sometimes. When COVID came, then, the countries fought with each other to, who would get stock. But they are still tighter than Africa. The Africa, an Africa that supports Africa will be a massive boost for all of us in Africa. And at this stage, the African Union is not a union that actually purposefully go out and work out how to look after each other in the best interests of Africa.
So what would you say then about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the concerted effort that we have seen in political leaders? I think for the first time, I was born in 1963, and the kind of unity I am seeing reminds me of the days when the fight against colonialism was beginning, which we saw dissipate over the years. Does the AFC draw a line in the sand that suggests that perhaps going forward, the unity that you are talking about, that you're looking for, could well be and could make a difference from a business perspective, especially for an organization such as yours?
I think it could make a difference for all organizations. Intra-African trade is really not great. We do need a free trade. If I even look at our industry, to have registrations in South Africa and then to have to do the whole process again for Kenya and go through a whole lot of different stories, you want one regulatory body. I do agree with you. I've never seen Africa so purposeful at the moment. And I think COVID united us, ironically, because we realized we were all in it together and we had to find our own solutions because everyone else was going to look after themselves first. So that inequality really drove it home to us. And there has been strong top African leaders shouting, saying, this is what we need to do together. My concern is often there's a lot of noise and it's all about execution. If we can see really solid execution, we get drivers and not talkers, we've got an opportunity to really grow the continent and to grow what we do together.
Yeah. You spoke about the work you are doing around vaccine manufacturing. Are you in any way integrated in some of the plans that we have heard coming through from the African Union?
Yeah, so we are, and that's one of our key ambitions is to build, because we've been blessed and fortunate enough to have this capacity and capability, and we've learned a lot, rather than just keeping that understanding and training to ourselves. What we're really going to look to now, and we can look for some help also from others, is to build almost what you might call a trading academy, whether it's from pharmacists, development scientists, engineers to run machines. And we'd like to put it next to our plant at Quebec or right next to it and just start training Africans so that with their quality in the laboratories, there's no just one function. We want to build that whole infrastructure in place so we have a complete pipeline of talent for all of Africa, all trained to a level which is acceptable at a global stage, and we'd like to be a part of delivering that to Africa.
Yeah. So at the moment, I see you want to make available 4 Aspen branded vaccines for the continent. I wanted to talk a little bit about the plans around that vaccine production outlook. What are you looking at in terms of spreading it around the continent? Or is there everything going to be coming from Quebec to the rest of the continent?
So we would be supplying out of our facility at Quebec.
Okay.
But beyond just vaccines, what we'd really like to do is do biological products, which are very difficult to access. So we would want to do things like insulins. We want to do cancer products, oncology products. All of them require this type of specialist manufacture, together with other vaccines that would be in the continent. In terms of spreading it around the continent, there are companies that have committed to building facilities in there's Senegal that's building its own capabilities. There's Kenya that has APIs from Moderna, and even in South Africa, there's the other players too that are participating. So I think you're seeing a general push towards improving our capabilities. Both, I'm talking not Aspens, but African capabilities, both in APIs, that's the chemicals that go in, and the finished dose form, which is the manufacture of the products. I think there are some realities. We had at the time, at the peak of the pandemic, there were, almost every country wanted their own manufacturing. It doesn't make sense. You're never going to be competitive because it is a business that requires economies of scale. So I think if you could have like a handful of manufacturers, we never want to be in the situation where we are short on vaccines, as happened with COVID. From purely Aspen perspective, we've increased our capabilities maybe threefold, so that we could make 1 billion doses if that was required for COVID in a period. So we've really scaled up to make sure we can do it. But of course, when there's no COVID, you've got to find other things to do with it, Godfrey, and that is why to have to create access for insulins, to make them affordable for the whole continent. And that's where Africa can work with Africa, to go and say, let's go and get the patients. We know these people have got diabetes. We're not testing them because we can't afford. If we do find it, we can't afford $100 a month a patient, but maybe we can afford $2 or $3. We saw that very clearly with ARVs. We saw how those prices just fell on the volumes, and our ability to play a major part in that access.
Yeah, I want to talk about research, and I want to talk about regulation, because I imagine those are key areas for your industry. But before we go there, I wanted to talk a little bit about the other expansion work that you are talking about. You are looking into the Middle East. How big an opportunity are you seeing there?
Yeah, the Middle East, the Middle East have approached us. They were really impressed with our capabilities. They too were left behind.
You were invited.
Sorry.
You were invited.
Yeah, so the Middle East approached us. A lot of Middle East, you saw the South African delegations that went to Saudi, etc. So they, no one wants to be left behind anymore. If you talk to, we at Africa were really worst off, but when you talk to the Middle East and if you talk to Latin Americans, all of them are saying, hey, we would like to have more control of our people's health, because what we've seen is health gets shut out and it goes to those that have the money and have the capabilities. And even if you look, a good example is India, which really doesn't have a lot of money, but has a lot of pharmaceutical capabilities, and they were able to ratchet up vaccines for their country, and in fact, blocked exports into Africa. So the Middle East felt hard undone by, so does Latin America. We were part of a trade envoy now to Saudi as well, where people are saying, we want to develop these skills. How do we get these skills? And of course, Aspen has been sort of front and center for many, because for those that aren't aware, we were Johnson & Johnson had 11 manufacturers of their vaccine, and we were brought on 7th.
Sure.
And we were able to, because they first brought up Europe and the US and then us, and we were first to produce, and we produced the most. So it was a real feather in the caps of our people in our facilities here. And as a consequence, people like the Middle East saying, how can you help us? How can you work with us to create these capacities, capabilities? How do we support you? So those are certainly discussions we well down the track with. And we've got a pretty large business across Latin America also. So we are hoping to build the capabilities and share what we have with those that want to share with us, particularly across the developing world.
Yeah, so those trade delegations do yield results. They are useful. We always dismiss them as junkets where the government people go and spend a lot of taxpayer money. Glad to hear they can make a difference. When you look at the business environment in the Middle East versus what we have on the continent, Stephen, without in any way, of course, seeking to bash on continent, what do you see there that we perhaps, as Africans, we can learn?
You know, and this is the personal view, so take it. I'd hate to be called anti-democratic or all of those things, Godfrey. But if you look at the real successes around the world, they've been where you have a benevolent despot, and so everyone's going to be shouting and screaming at me. But if you think about how things worked in Singapore, you know, and where it started from and where they are today. When you look at the Middle East, you look at a place like Dubai in the middle of the desert, and how it gets there. And the advantage, of course, the Middle East have oil and funding, and places like Saudi have all those things. But it's how they take that funding and spend it to either through sovereign funds, through investments globally, which really, sure, there are people that are very rich individually, but the overall population is also benefit. And then when I look at Africa and I see all these wonderful raw materials and as much oil as you want, et cetera, and yet the people aren't benefiting to that degree. You know, I think those are the lessons we can learn from people like the Middle East is how do we maximize the value of the resources for the benefit of everybody? You know, you look at Angola, you look at Mozambique with gas, you look at Nigeria with oil, and you say, well, these resources are finite, which the people in the Middle East have worked out. How do we take this money and create a longer stream earnings?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I'll stand with you when they shout, because we've certainly seen the difference that strong leadership makes in other parts of the world.
You need to make decisions, no matter how unpopular they are. But you need to make decisions for people. And this is what we're doing, and it's going. You know, I hate bureaucracy. You know, bureaucracy is a waste of time. Bureaucracy is often an excuse not to make a decision.
I agree with you, Stephen.
In Aspen business, we say simply, you give me a yes or a no. If you say maybe, it's because technically maybe is the right decision, but don't use it as an excuse not to make a decision.
Would you go so far as to say perhaps the need for those quick decisions is perhaps one of the key lessons that we could take out of COVID-19? The crisis that, the pandemic that overwhelmed a lot of our countries and of course many other parts of the world. It wasn't just an African problem to deal with.
Yeah, I think you saw how regulators suddenly truncated 10-year processes to 6 months in a relatively riskless way. And I thought, you know, I thought the world, it's always easy in retrospect, but, you know, when you're sitting there at the time, it's a really, I thought the world reacted quite quickly and quite well.
Yeah, certainly something that we could learn from here on the continent as well. As I said, I wanted to talk very quickly about regulation, to what extent it enables companies such as yours to get about the work that they want to do. And then also if you're getting enough support in terms of supporting research, which is so critical in the development of many of the vaccines that we need and other medicines, of course.
So regulations and resource are critical in our industry. From a regulatory point of view, we are in a very highly regulated market. You can imagine you can't.
Too regulated, Stephen? Too regulated?
No, I think, you know, you have one eye drop and 10,000 people lose an eye or the wrong. It's frustrating sometimes, but I think it is necessary to give people absolute security around the medicines that they take. I do think it's tough. There are areas that could be less regulated. You know, if you've got a copy of one dossier that's the same as the other, but I think we're moving towards that area. I think it has to be regulated, I'm afraid. I hate regulations and all of that, but it has to be regulated. to help us sleep at night and to give us security of what we have. I mean, you've seen how the kids in Asia and some in Africa have died because of a medicine a cough mixture that came out of India. You wouldn't want that to happen to your child or anybody's child for that matter. So, and then the regulations, once it happens, they increase and they get steeper and steeper. In terms of research, I think as a country, we've got some really brilliant researchers, and you saw during COVID how brilliant they were and how they quickly stepped up to the front. And these, I think, as a country, we need to respect research a whole lot more. And this research often needs to come in through your tertiary institutions, your universities. But it doesn't happen by accident. You need to fund it. We happen to have clever people, but if we're funding them, I'm seeing lots of older clever people rather than younger clever people. So we've got to nurture that, and I really hope that there is a push for higher allocations towards research. From a clinical perspective, South Africa fights way above its weight because everybody wants to come here because we've got clever scientists who do things very cost efficiently. And clinical work is testing a drug on somebody or finding out the sequences for COVID and how we've been able to do things like that. So we've got quite a unique position here, which I think we should be taking more advantage of clinically. Yeah. It's a very tricky area. And I think we've got really smart people, and we really should be putting money behind them and asking them, how do they see this picture? Because when I deal with big pharma and even the vaccine manufacturers now, they all want to come to South Africa to do clinical trials. How do we learn from this to keep building a big and better industry and having more money put into a research base?
Absolutely. We need to find the balance that enables us to support them while at the same time being, of course, responsible. Stephen, thank you for your time today. You have been listening there to the story of Stephen Saad, CEO of Aspen Pharmaceuticals, the largest vaccine manufacturer on the African continent. A story centered around the boy from Durban who went on to build a multi-billion rand company operating in more than 50 countries and turning over more than 30 billion rand. Thank you for watching Captains of Industry. Until next time, goodbye.